Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon, and welcome to today's edition of The Law and You. I am your host, yours truly, attorney at law, licensed in the state of New York and in Guyana and Trinidad and Tobago. I'm Shellon, Washington. Um, Good afternoon, guys. Today I'm going to be talking about some of the mitigating circumstances you can use to help yourself out in a divorce. Now, when I speak about mitigating circumstances, this is as it relates to you being able to reduce any liability or any possible whatever it is that what is being imposed on you. The most thing that is imposed on anybody during a divorce is financial liability. That's what is mostly imposed. There's something called the moneyed spouse in a divorce. And the money spouse is usually viewed as the person who has the money. And that's the person that is typically responsible for carrying the other party's attorney fees, the other spousal support, child support, whatever it is. So today we're going to be discussing some of the mitigating circumstances that will help you take some of the weight off of you. Now, one of the things that people don't recognize is that divorce is a contractual, a financial contract. That's all it is. A marriage. A marriage is a financial contract. So a lot of times people view marriage as some sort of romantic getaway with flowers and sunshine and butterfly and all these fantasies that people imagine in their mind. But the reality of it, a marriage is a financial contract between two parties. And a lot of times that financial contract is not equal. The equities are not balanced in that marriage. Sometimes what you will find is one party is pulling all of the weight and the other is pulling none. So, in the case where one party is pulling all of the weight and the other one is really not pulling anything, the one who's pulling the weight will have a lot of mitigating factors to put forward in any subsequent divorce between the parties. Number one, if a husband is paying all the bills, he's paying the mortgage, the light, the water, he's putting food on the table, and the wife is also working, but she's not putting any of her money into the financial pool, because remember I said in the beginning that a marriage is really a financial contract between the parties, and this contract is structured in a way where it's understood that the law formulated rules to guide that contract. Now, you really have no saying in what happens if you get married. If you choose to get married and then there's a divorce, you're literally, if you can't settle outside of court, you're literally putting your life in the hand of one judge who's going to make that decision for you. So that's why I encourage people up front. If you're going to get into any marital arrangement with somebody, and you have assets, or you know that you're valuable, and you know that if there's a divorce you cannot afford to split those assets, have an agreement up front with that person. And in that agreement, make sure you put in there that should there be a divorce, and if you know that you love the woman and you were providing wholeheartedly for that woman, put in that agreement that maybe you'll give that woman $20,000 a year to support her. So it's capped. So in a subsequent divorce, that amount could never be changed, right? So if you fail to put an agreement, a prenuptial or even a post-nuptial in place, and you just continue with the relationship with the person, and then it comes to a divorce, and the person said, well, I need you to maintain me, I need you to do this, and I need you to do that. What are your mitigating factors that the court will possibly consider in determining how this arrangement is going to end? Because the financial obligation or the financial contract can be terminated at any time between either parties. And I wish people would understand a couple of things before they even get married. Marriage is not just about marrying and moving into a house and acquiring things together. It's about making sure you put your financial affairs in order, because if one of the party is working and the other one is not, the one who's not working becomes a liability liability to you, and a liability which you can easily ease yourself off of by ensuring that you have a pre or a post nuptial in place, so that if that person decides that they no longer want to work on the relationship, they no longer want to ensure that you guys continue in a happy home, you would be able to say, okay, I have this to rely on. So we don't have to go and make a decision on something so important, which is our lives. And I'll tell you, if a judge makes a decision for you, it doesn't always be the best decision, because the judge look at the cases, look at the past history of what has happened in similar situations. And then if you have a good attorney, the attorney would be able to pull all the cases that favors your situation. If the attorney is no good, then good luck to you, because the attorney will not be doing the best to assist you in getting the best possible or most favorable outcome that is satisfactory to you. You know, I've had instances where I represented the wife. Most of the times I represent the wife. There are few occasions where I represent husbands. I mean, I'm on both sides sometimes, but I tell you, society treats men way different than they treat women. Men get the harsher bargain no matter where you go, because it is understood in society that a man is supposed to take care of his home. A man is supposed to take care of his children. A man is supposed to take care of his wife. So rarely will you find the burden being on the woman, regardless of the financial status of the woman. The court usually looks to the man to make sure that he understands that equity has to be done, that he needs to take care of his children, that he needs to take care of his spouse. If his spouse is a person that is not working, the court doesn't, because the state obviously don't want anyone to become a ward of the state. And any man believes that he can run to court and the court is going to sympathize with him and say, oh no, look, he did this or he did that. The court doesn't take a man's side. And that's what men need to get into their head. It's always the woman, because the woman ends up with the children. The woman ends up with the financial responsibility. And if you're going to have your woman ending up with all these responsibility, it's your job to ensure that you put things in place, that if the marriage fails, you don't have to go to court and litigate something that could be easily settled up front. At the time you got married, or even after you're in the relationship, you settle these scores with your partner. You know, one of the things people don't recognize in New Jersey, verbal contractual or verbal agreement in a marriage stands up in court, and there are actual cases that shows that, you know. But in New York, you have to put it in writing. You have to get either a separation agreement or some sort of agreement in New York, and that is what's going to settle the score for you. But if you understand that you need to put things in place up front, you will avoid this whole pitfall of having to figure out, how am I going to get out of this mess? Now, one of the mitigating circumstances for a person, the money spouse, is to say, well, you know, my spouse has the ability, my spouse is younger. Number one, there are instances where a younger man, older man marries a younger woman, maybe 10 years, 15 years apart, or it might just be 5 years apart, or vice versa. A woman marries a younger man, and the court is going to look to the age of the parties, number one. And the court is going to say, okay, this one is younger. Even though you're not the money spouse, you still have the ability to go out there, seek some sort of employment, elevate yourself educationally by going back to school. And then once you go back to school, you'll be able to put yourself in a better financial situation. And that's one of the factors that the court will consider in terms of determining, okay, what type of assets I should give you, how much of the assets you're entitled to, what type of maintenance are you entitled to, if you're entitled to anything at all. The only thing it's difficult to find any mitigating circumstances for is the child support, because in in New York, this child support amount is fixed statutorily, and you could contract, you know, outside of the factors, outside of the law that determines how much you're supposed to give in terms of child support. You could vary from the standard or deviate. It's called a deviation from the standard child support amount. So you and the person you're divorcing can agree that you're going to deviate. For instance, sometimes the money spouse has a lot of financial responsibility. Sometimes they have to pay so many debts back or loans or whatever I've seen this happen. And that's why sometimes it's good to negotiate things. That's an easy way, because if you have to go to court and litigate that, then you're going to have to establish, show the court how and why and when you got to this point where you cannot afford your responsibility on child support. But the one in terms of giving your spouse assets, it's easier to mitigate if the spouse is younger. That's one factor. Another factor is pre-acquired assets. So for instance, let's say a doctor marries a CNA. We know that CNA don't be paid a lot. Those people get paid very little, and it's really, it's a task for them, especially now with inflation. It's difficult for a person who is a CNA to stand up on their own, pay their own rent, and do all these things that are necessary. So in the case of a CNA, right, and a doctor, I'm using two ridiculous analysis here, because I don't think any doctor would be crazy enough to marry a CNA. But these things do happen. So let's say a doctor marries a CNA, and they're divorcing now because there's irreconcilable differences. The parties cannot continue to get along. They cannot continue to live with each other. So they're like, okay, let's get this divorce. Now, because the CNA, when the doctor married the CNA, he knew that she would not have been able to be self-sufficient, or she would not have been able to provide for herself, right? She would not have been able to, there's a lot of things she would not be able to do as a CNA, because his license is worth more. But take into account that he acquired that license before he married her. If he had got the license after he married her, some state allow for you to value license and the party to be entitled to a portion of the value of that license. New York has abolished that. New York used to allow it, so that if you have a spouse that you were with for a very, very long time, and they qualify as a doctor or a lawyer or something of value with a license, you would have been entitled to a value of that license, because you would have sacrificed with that spouse to get that license. So if the doctor had that license before, the spouse is not entitled to that license, not entitled to share in that license. Again, the other thing, if the doctor is older, again, his age will be taken into account, whether or not, if whatever amount of assets is given to him, whether or not he will be able to make that suffice during his retirement ages or during the retirement period. Now, if he had pre-acquired property, the court's going to take that into account, and the court's going to hold the pre-acquired property as separate property. Now, when you're discussing the issue of pre-acquired property, you have to be careful. Pre-acquired property could mitigate your losses during divorce. If you own something before you actually marry that person, keep that asset separate and do not commingle that asset. If you learn how to keep that asset separate, the party will never be able to touch that asset. So what I advise people to do is, if you have a house or some sort of investment asset prior to getting married, once you get married, don't put anything into that asset. If it's a home and if it's a rental property and you have tenants in there, let the tenants continue to pay for everything on that property. The property will never become marital assets, because the court will treat it as pre-acquired assets, and your spouse who was hoping to get their hands on that property will never be able to touch your property. So that's one of the things you have to keep into account, to make sure that you keep your asset separate and apart from everything else. I see some of you guys are joining. Hi, Shaq. Hail up to Shaq. I see Christy Lynch is there. So guys, thank you so much again for joining the live today. And I hope you click on the like button and share. Now, guys, don't forget, if I'm sharing any content here that you know is valuable to somebody you know, or somebody you know, a family member, a friend, a neighbor might be interested in this type of content, please share the content as much as you can, so that I can continue to bring you this type of information to help you to, be able to successfully navigate this pathway in life, in marriage, divorces, whatever it is. You have to be able to successfully navigate your way through it. So guys, let's continue. Now, let's talk about another mitigating factor other than pre-acquired property. We spoke about the age of the party. the age of your spouse being able to go out and work and acquire their own assets at some point if the spouse is younger. Um, Let me stress the age plays a very, very big factor. I've seen in one case where the court in New York handed the wife the entire marital home and give the husband nothing and made him pay her spousal support. Guys, there was a 20-year gap between the parties. And a 20-year gap is a pretty large gap to have. So that it would have been obvious that the court doesn't want the wife to become a ward on the state. So when the husband decided he wanted to go, and guys, let me tell you, 98% of the time when I see cases like this, is because the husband maybe found somebody else and he wanted to go experience life with somebody younger. No, get this. A person has a right. Nobody should be with anyone. Nobody should be mad at anyone who decides that they want to leave to go somewhere else to enjoy life with somebody else. So that is part of life. A man or a woman has the right to choose whoever they would like to enjoy the rest of their lives with. So if a man chooses to go, he has a right. But the law says when he chooses to go and his wife was 20 years older than him, the law said, okay, not so quickly. We're going to send you broke. And unfortunately for that man, he met with the worst judge in New York. I don't want to say the judge's name, but if people should ever encounter that judge, she is anti-male, pro-female. She does not like male at all. So what she did, I read the judgment. I felt sorry for that man. I was not involved in that case. I only got on it after he came to me and said he wants to terminate the maintenance. And then I was like, okay, let's work on getting the maintenance portion terminated. But I'm telling you, when I read the judgment, I felt pity for that man, but then that's his fault. He chose to marry somebody 20 years his senior, and then he chose at some point in his life to change his mind and decide that he wanted to go and experience life with a younger woman. And this is the reality of it. The court ordered that he should pay unlimited spousal support. There was no termination period. There was none of that. The court slapped him with a maintenance order and then also handed the woman the marital home and said, this is for you. And that was the end of his case. Unfortunately, it appears to me that he wasn't represented by an attorney during the divorce proceedings. I'm of the opinion that if he was represented by an attorney up front, he would have stand a better chance of walking away with much more than he actually received, which was nothing. So in these type of cases, any divorce cases, make sure, unless it's uncontested, and even in uncontested cases, there are factors that you don't even know that you can consider that you would need an attorney to get involved in your uncontested or contested divorce, because there's things that you don't even know. For instance, I often tell people when they come for uncontested divorce, there's something that you don't usually think about, but it's something that is worth exploring, and make sure you take care of it, because I've seen it happen. There was a case where a person came, they were trying to retire. They had already divorced. They divorced on their own. And then they were trying to retire. And the pension administrator sent him and told him that he needed to have a qualified domestic relations order or a judgment of divorce saying that he's entitled to that pension by himself. Now, take into account, a lot of people, once they're married, they tend to put their spouses on their retirement account. Their spouse is listed as a person that they're married to and as a beneficiary, and that person is entitled to death benefits or whatever. So a lot of times once they divorce, if you do a pro se divorce, one of the things that people don't know, that if you do a pro se divorce and you don't make sure that the judgment addresses the pension, you're going to get a problem. You're going to experience a problem in that the pension administrator is going to ask you for a qualified domestic relations order or that judgment that says that you're the one who's entitled to your pension to the exclusion of that divorced spouse. So be careful with whatever you choose to do when you're getting whether it's a contested or non-contested divorce. Be very, very careful. Now, back to your mitigating circumstances that a court would most likely take into account. Another mitigating circumstances is the contributions of one spouse to the marriage, or the spouse that is you're putting aside. what contributions has that spouse made to the marriage? Now, some spouses make a lot of contributions. Some women, in that they cook, they clean, they bear children to the marriage. They make sure that the husband is taken care of, his clothing are washed. They make sure that they clean up the house. On the other hand, there are some women who are more a liability to the marriage, in that they are lazy. And I'm telling you, I've seen quite a few of these. They do give birth and bear children to the marriage. However, they do not cook. They do not clean. They do not wash their husband's clothes. They don't do any of those things. So the husband has not only a liability in terms of the wife being home and have to take care of his children, but he has a lazy wife, in that he has to come home and cook. He has to come home and clean, and he has to also make sure he gets his own laundry done. If he fails to do those things, it will never get done. Now, these are factors that people typically don't consider work, but it's actually work for the spouse who is actually staying home. So if you weren't contributing, also emotional support. So if you weren't giving your spouse emotional support, you weren't giving your spouse any type of support at home in terms of being able to cook, clean, take care of the basic necessities of the family, then you will basically be in no position to claim that you're entitled to 50% of the assets. Because the question is, what have you contributed? And this is going to be a mitigating circumstances. This is going to be mitigating to the moneyed spouse. A lot of times people spend their entire marriage not catering to their spouse. They're always gone. They're catering to themselves. And the record reflects it. There's a lot of people I know, they take their money and they spend it on themselves. You will often find in a Black household, this is very common in Black household, but I see it's different in some other cultures, where the woman actually takes care of the home. She makes sure, I've had people tell me, like, the woman didn't ask them for anything. She just went and she did X and she did Y. But it's the responsibility of the man to always ensure he asks his wife. If you see your wife doing something, like, or you just purchased a home and the home needs to be furnished, you speak to your wife and tell your wife, we will go together and purchase the furniture. We will do this together. But oftentimes the man in Black household, he takes a sideline. Very few you will see the man is actually vested in the home and he takes care of it. If something is broken, he will call the handyman or he will fix it himself. He will ensure that things are in order in his home and he pays all of his bills. He takes care of these things. This is rare in some Caribbean household, so when you're speaking about a contributions of his spouse, it's kind of gets blurred, because most of the times the woman is actually the one taking care of the household, doing everything. And there are instances where the woman is very lazy. Likewise, there are instances where the man is very lazy. I've seen instances where the woman is the money spouse and the man is just not, he's earning a lot of money, but he is investing the money on himself. And guys, as you know, the typical thing is, usually when a man is younger, his financial value is very low. But as he gets older, the financial value goes up. And that's mostly when most men tend to leave their family, abandon their family for somebody that they think they want to spend the rest of their lives with. And like I said earlier, there's nothing wrong with that. And I will not preach that people should not leave. Everyone has a right to spend the rest of their life with whoever they choose. However, if a man chooses to do that, the law says he's going to have to pay with a price. And the price tab that he's going to pay is going to be hefty, because if the woman was dependent on him, he's going to be forced to support her. And if there's still minor children, he's going to be made to take care of those minor children, because as he excel or as he goes up financially, so does his burden and his responsibility to his children. Every time you see those, there's a modification on his child support obligation, that means every year his money goes up. He will be responsible to go back to the court, because the woman can take him back to court and have him reevaluated to increase the child support amount. A lot of people don't take this part into consideration, but actually your contributions to your marriage is really invaluable. Whatever you do, is invaluable. Just like if a woman is lazy and she's not contributing to the home, she just sits down and the husband comes from work. He does a 9 to 5 job, and then he comes home and he still does everything. Lazy. She's not contributing much. And if they end up in a divorce, she is not going to get much because her contributions is not one of the easiest way to get as much as you want out of a divorce is to do a settlement. If you do a settlement, it's better for you to sit with your spouse and talk these things through. But some people are irrational, they lack common sense, and they lack the ability to just sit and have a common sense conversation. They want war. Some people don't like peace, they like war. And if you're one of those people who like to war and you want to go to war, then I'm here for it, because you can just literally pick the phone up and give me a call at 718-877-3100. I tell you, it's not good to be bitter in a divorce. It's better to release that person and let them go in peace, and not to be bitter and to keep fighting indefinitely, because the more you fight, the more you're going to be losing financially. And a lot of people they don't get this. I see a man, he doesn't have a lot of money. He paid the attorney $3,500. He took out of his pocket to pay an attorney. And I'm wondering, where is the common sense in a lot of people? He paid an attorney $3,500 to do what, when he could have sit down with his spouse and negotiated an agreement and come to a settlement. And the lady said she was willing to settle with this man. She said she told him, like, hey, let's do this, and all we will do is go to the attorney to sign the paperwork to get the divorce. But instead of listening to her, and based on the conversation I had with her, it would have only cost them, for a non-contested divorce, all it would have cost them is $1,800. But he refused to adhere to what his wife was saying. He goes and he pays an attorney $3,500. And I'm like, for what? He's going to end up paying that attorney more, much more than that, just to litigate unnecessarily. And the sad part is those parties has children. So he could have literally taken that money and put it towards his children. So you got to be careful, like when you're thinking about, resolving your difference, doing it in a peaceful manner, mitigating your losses. The more you're able to sit at the table and talk about stuff and negotiate stuff, is the better for you. I've had one case where the lady thought she was going to get, spousal support from the man. So they delayed the divorce in hopes that she was going to be supported by the man. She actually wasn't straight in the country. So then she goes before the judge, and the judge threatened that, like, listen, if you think you're going to come here and the marriage is very short, on a short marriage, and ask me about anything, you are wasting your time, because it's not going to happen under my watch. So the judge easily got rid of her, because when she got those harsh awakening, those words from the judge, she recognized that it was better to just stop paying the attorney thousands of dollars to keep going to court, and to just settle. This, I want people without money to understand, that it's better to settle than to keep fighting. You're going to lose thousands of dollars when you keep fighting, versus if you just agree to negotiate. And then if you do go to trial, you don't know what you're going to meet, because I could give you, or any attorney could give you, the best possible representation that you could have. But if you meet the wrong judge on the wrong day, nobody can save you from the wrong judge. All right, guys. Well, I thank you guys so much for joining me again this Saturday evening for the Law and You. And today we discuss mitigating circumstances in divorce. I'm going to be back again next Saturday at the same time. Thank you so much for joining, and I hope you do enjoy the rest of your weekend. If you're looking for consultation on any of these issues, the number is right there. Please give me a call. The number to call is 718-877-3100. Thank you guys so much. Give me a call. Consultation is free, no cost to you. Enjoy the rest of your weekend.